Scott, because the A to B stuff and TK20 were things that you would put on there, and it would be good to talk about the core academic skills while you and Elle are both still here. And then if we need to talk, if we don't get through, if we have more stuff after you leave, I think the stuff at the top I can just take notes on. So.
Okay. So we're all familiar with the Mass Pathways, the A to B setup. Back in 2014, 15, and 16, all of the community colleges met with the four-year institutions, and for programs, we developed we picked foundational courses. For my program, we had 5 foundational courses, and we all agreed upon outcomes for those courses. Well, the time for assessment has finally come. It was 2015 and 2016. I've been approached by Pat Marshall to supervise the assessment of the community college and four-year institutions for criminal justice. I know that the other programs they're reaching out to people. So this is going to be something that's going to be really interesting in the sense that we're going to be able to see on a statewide by program how our students are learning. But what's going to make it really difficult is if the programs didn't accept or haven't integrated those outcomes into the courses that we agreed upon back 5-6 years ago. So that is coming up. I have my first meeting in March with that, and I'm sure that other departments might be included from that point on. My meeting is just a kickoff meeting. We haven't notified the other institutions of what the process is going to look like, because we have to put the process, develop a process. But that's going to be an interesting spin, because most of our assessment outside of Northern Essex has been institutional assessment on our core academic skills. This is going to be a statewide assessment that's specific to programs. Anybody have any questions on that stuff? Well, as it develops deeper and after my March appointment, I'll send out, we won't need a meeting for it. I'll send out the gist of what the meeting was and the steps that criminal justice will be taking. And I'm sure that they'll match for the other programs. The other item that I had put on the agenda was TK20. So Kirsten, Melvin, and I were passing back and forth some emails on TK20. TK20 is up for renewal, and we've elected not to renew it. There aren't enough programs that are actually using TK20. This brings up an important step forward, in my opinion, is what assessment tools could we possibly look at and use as an institution that would get the most amount of participation? Because TK20 was a system outside of something that we were typically using and that we were comfortable with, and there wasn't a significant learning curve to using TK20. Other options could be Blackboard Outcomes, which I am a huge fan of, because if you were to assign a discussion, you would assign that course level outcome to that discussion. And as you were grading, there would be an outcomes assessment that's part of the rubric. And you would automatically get each week, if you were grading a discussion or a writing assignment, you would get real-time data on assessment within that particular course. The other side to that is with outcomes is that it sends it to a repository that the program coordinator, Kirsten, myself, this committee, Paul, the supervisors would also have access to that real-time data as grades were being completed. That is one option, one technology that we could leverage. I'm leaning towards that and kind of selling it because, one, I know it. The other side is we're all using Blackboard already. And it's just a matter of, if you're in an academic setting and you're using rubrics in your online courses already, then it's just a matter of just assigning the outcomes to those rubrics. Because currently my rubric says criteria 1 is competency 1, competency 2. Then I have writing style, then for my discussions, and then it would say participation and preparation. Those are the criteria. So my competency 1 and competency 2 criteria would actually change to the specific course level outcome, and that's been pre-assigned within the course. And then I could start collecting real-time data instead of me going back and going, okay, what is competency 1 for this week? I would know exactly what it is. But that's something that this was more of an announcement to let you know that TK20 is not being renewed. Yes.
I had a question about that. When Melba emailed to see if if English wanted to continue using it, I explained how we had really tried and that we switched to having just everybody email me the essays I identified using the random number generator in the fall. And I had significantly higher participation, as in everyone did it, even if I had to email them a few times. So that's really unbelievable because we've had about 20% participation in TK20. And I know that, like, sorry, those of us who use it a lot feel like there's not much of a learning curve, but I think faculty actually found that there was a big learning curve, and DCE faculty just got very overwhelmed with like all the sets of directions. It's kind of just an aside that I'm 100% behind not continuing with that, but that I want to know if we'll still have access. I asked Melba, but she didn't respond to this yet. Will we still have access to the information or data we created through TK20? And I don't just mean the basic report because I know how to pull those, but I mean, like, you know, there's interactivity there. I'm just wondering if we could find out a date we will lose access. I think we need to publicize that so that everyone who has used it can pull everything they'll need before we lose it, because I assume at some point when we don't have it, we could lose information. And if, I mean, I know this is happening and I haven't even gone and pulled the reports from 5 years and downloaded them. And I know I need to do that, but I don't know if everybody else knows they need to do that. So
I use it. I'm one of the departments that uses it. I did not even think about that. So thank you for bringing it up.
Yeah.
I would highly recommend that when we do pull the data, specifically for your area, those of us that use it, that we take those PDFs that we'll get from it and upload them to the portal so that it's still part of our assessment legacy for each department. But I didn't think about that, and I will get you an answer.
Thanks. I think a date would be really helpful, and I would love to know that, even though I did just put it on my to-do list for this week. So I'm going to do it, but I think there are people here who used it and then stopped, but they might need that. You know, it's kind of like when Stephen Mathis left, unfortunately, we lost everything because nobody knew he was going to go and we couldn't access his materials. I feel like it could end up being the same situation, sort of, because if people like us stopped using it, but might still want that information, I think we should probably communicate that institution-wide a few times before that information is gone forever.
Yeah, because all of our niche stuff is in there too.
Yes, we're going to really need to think about how we're going to pull this, because it also pulled all of our student samples. And I don't know that I'll need them again, but like, what if for some reason we would want them? I don't know if maybe I should try to find out if there's a way to like do a download of every submission, because we pulled directly from Blackboard. Like, I don't know, but I don't want to lose this information and then find out in a year, man, we wish we had that for this new thing we want to do, right? So yeah. I'd like to know how to kind of like pull it off.
Yeah, I'm part of the IT committee. I'll definitely will talk to them about this point. I'm sure they have some checklists before they remove any software. And I don't know, they might have some kind of backup. They have to back up everything in NECC server. But definitely I will talk to Loris, as the chair of that committee, see what they can do, because they just in case if they eliminated by the end of the month, not everybody have the time and the skills, like you said, to download all this information. I think Northern Essex, they should take care of this stuff in behalf of the faculty. And it's a really good point. Thank you. I forgot about it too.
Kirsten, it sounds like the data from TK20 is something that we should consider as part of, like, although it's going away, like legacy, a data asset that you as like would be the data manager
Mhm.
for our data governance work. And unfortunately, not all of these processes are happening right now, but that's why we're trying to do data governance to create a more like institutional wide, like if IT does it, but when these things are happening within the silos of their other areas, sometimes these questions are being asked. So that's part of what data governance is trying to move forward and why we have, institutional stakeholders from across the college. So Kirsten is on that, and it could be something that she, keeps in the back of her mind.
Yeah.
Other university, what they do, they have a list. They call it like exist software. And there's like some very specific people, they have to sign off on that checklist before remove that software for anything. Like even the faculty quitting, they have to go with this checklist. You have to sign. A lot of people have to sign for him before he exit. And we should do it for the software too.
I agree.
Exit checklist. Call it something like that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, for sure, roles and like transitions, that is an area that is like ripe for attention at NECC. So we will be digging into that. No promises on how fast it'll get done, because I think it's going to be a can of worms once we open the lid, but it does need to be addressed. I agree.
Scott, can I ask you, the Blackboard outcome sounds really intriguing. Is it the type of thing that like it could be part of the training for courses like incorporated into that to get the buy-in from faculty as well? Like, is it?
It definitely could be. It's because of the fact that most of us, having gone over the past 2 years of developing courses, and that it's pretty intuitive, and I really like it. It was something that I used at a different institution, and I had dreamed about bringing it. It was something that Kirsten and I talked about over a year and a half ago. So it would be something nice to have and have it part of iTeach, because I think that if we can automate assessment at the institution, then more people will buy into it. And we won't have to worry about begging people for artifacts or having adjuncts engage in it if it's already part of the course that they're using. If we explain to them, like in criminal justice, our adjuncts they have academic freedom, but they don't use it. I tell them, oh, you're going to teach 101. I have a full 101 course it's got the rubrics in it, the assignments, tests, it's got it all. Do you want that, or do you want to create something? And they're like, I'll take it. And they leave it and they run with it. If we sell it like that to the new adjuncts and just say, hey, this is already a complete package, plus it works with our assessment, we could start to build towards what we're really hoping to build, is that culture of assessment. But I agree, Kim, yes, if that's the road we went down, we could definitely have it part of iTeach. But I would be more than willing, or Kirsten and I would be more than willing to provide extra training on that to get more people to do it, kind of like the assessment workshops that I've been doing.
I mean, it seems like over time, it would actually save a lot of time too, for, as you said.
It would.
Which is
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's it in terms of like the automating it, like the more of that stuff that can be set up ahead of time, so that at the end of the semester, the heavy lift is not the sorting through the artifacts and doing the calculation part of it, I guess would be the word I would use, right? But if we have the data available, then that frees up a lot more time to actually look at what we're getting out of our assessment practices and thinking about how we can actually change stuff. Because I think that that's sort of our missing link right now, is like we spend a lot of time reading artifacts and grading stuff and doing assessment. And so then by the time we have all of that in front of us and we're like, okay, now what? We're like up against the next cycle already. And so I think the Blackboard outcomes is one of those ways that like the assessment is sort of happening, the assessment against the outcomes is happening in the background along the way. So it just gives us that much more time and mental capacity to think about like, all right, what happened here? And a lot more real-time data too, because you don't have to wait until the end of the semester, right? And take the names off of all of your artifacts and send it into a mystery portal. And we get some numbers back. You can actually look at how things are going in real time, which is significantly more helpful, I think.
And I think that's the key about this is as we get deeper into this, as for all of you, including Andre, as chairs and coordinators and directors, you're able to look at that data at week 6 and say, you just, as in that role, you could see what's happening. You may not see what the assignments look like, but you're seeing what that raw data looks like. And that's a department meeting topic. You could say, just so you know, here's just some rough data that came out from Blackboard outcomes. So what do you guys think about this? And it that's that dialogue of assessment that just naturally occurs, but now we've got concrete stuff to talk about.
Well, it also seems cool because faculty could adjust things in real time again, right? Like if things aren't working a certain way, to totally shift gears, which is really kind of neat when you think about it.
Right. If you have an assessment, like an exam that's geared towards a specific outcome and, 10% of your students pass, right, then at the beginning of the semester that you have not met that outcome, and you can think of other ways to do it, which is super important. Sorry, Scott, there were so there's Blackboard outcomes. I think we had also briefly discussed using Teams, because obviously we're Microsoft Office 365, because that has a lot of tools in it as well. Although I think we would have to build something like a space or something like that, sort of like the Blackboard portal, right? Like it doesn't just like sort of exist, and it wouldn't be automatic the way Blackboard outcomes is. And then there was one other thing that we had talked about over email that I can't find right now.
I forget it as well. But I think the best step now, once all of you should have gotten the email I just sent to Melba about the 2 questions that we asked, when our access to TK20 ends and the exact date of our last opportunity to step into TK20. I think once we get that date, I think it's really important that we, maybe as a committee, we sample some assessment tools. And I'm sure they have sandbox, these companies have sandbox tools that we can go in, play around, see the functionality. And then as a committee, I think maybe we should make the recommendation of what's the best tool after we've had a chance to review them. I'm sure that I know that there's more, Talisma is another one. There's a bunch of assessment tools out there. And I think that we really need to look at what's the best for us. I like Blackboard outcome, but the rest of you might turn around and go, Scott likes it, but we don't. So we're going to go this way. I really think it's important that we, as faculty and staff, the people that are actually going to be using it, I think that we should be the ones that are testing it.
I love that idea. So thank you for suggesting that we all have a chance to try it. I'm inclined to think Blackboard outcomes is going to make a lot of sense because we already have it and people are open to new things they already know, but I like that idea of trying new things. I also wanted to say, I feel like, I know we talk about this a lot and we've tried before to come up with some kind of idea to guide departments on assessment, but I wonder if it might be worth our energy and effort to try to come up with some kind of not required, but almost like a guide for what we recommend in terms of a structure for organizing assessment. I know that's a huge project, or it sounds like one as I say it out loud, but even as somebody who's really interested in data collection and assessment and using it to inform the work my department does and that I do personally in my classes, I feel sometimes almost a little bit overwhelmed with all of the ideas I hear. And I wonder if maybe even just having a short guide of best practices and strategies and almost an annual or a biannual calendar of things you might want to do and then departments pick. I know that's a big thing to suggest. I'd be happy to work on it. I'd love to help with that, but I wonder if it might help some of the departments. We're not all Habib,
Yeah.
Well, and that kind of goes, I'd put supporting the program coordinators better on the agenda, because I think that is and that could be one of the very real initiatives that we take to better support our program coordinators. But one of the conversations, that Scott and Paul and I have had is, where does this assessment work fall in program coordinators' job descriptions? Is it really there? Are there enough other things in that job description that people are getting one sometimes 2 course releases for that assessment, really people have enough time for it. But then also are we really giving program coordinators enough support and how to do assessment, not only in their area of expertise, but also the expectations that we have for institutional assessment, both in terms of like the program review cycle, our annual, the E-series stuff for NECHI, all of those kinds of things, or we just assume that if you're a program coordinator, you magically know those things, which we know is not true. So I like the idea of starting to create some like documentation around best practices about what needs to get done, what we hope that you can do, what tools are available to you. I think that would be a really good way to start that. But since you opened that door, why don't we just have a quick conversation about, some of you are program coordinators, right? Like what is your sense about what the program coordinators really need? Other than more time, because I know that time is one of the biggest issues.
I have to leave to run the training, so I'm not trying to like take up everybody's time, but I have to go. And I just wanted to say that I think more assistance would help me. Like I would like it if somebody who knows more than I do, so anyone else in this group, I imagine, could look at what I'm doing in the English department and tell me like, I'm doing it based on research. I'm not just making things up, but I would love feedback and guidance. Am I doing the best I can? Does anyone see areas where I can improve my data collection, better use the data, better share it? Sorry, I'm just getting real cold. But for me personally, those are things I'd like. I care so much about this and I want to do it as well as possible. And I'm learning a lot and I learned so much from you guys and from everything I'm reading, but I wish I had somebody who would look at what I'm doing and what my department is doing and say, you're on the right track, or this is a great start. What if you added in this? That might be useful. I think I would really benefit from that. But I'm so sorry. This is my favorite group of all. I wish we met more because this is so important to me. I have to go. But if you guys decide to add in more meetings, I'm here. Sorry.
See you in a minute, Al.
Yeah, I just want to add something about what she said. I think we have to be like a little bit more proactive and think a little bit about the process to make it easy for faculty because they're busy. Every time you add something to their plate, they no. I was thinking, try to identify some courses, very popular. I can give you example, Comp 1, Stat, and identify some faculty, they can let go a little bit this freedom of teaching and standardize one project, give it to the student, collect it. That'll be really good data and easy to work with. Instead, each one with different project, different rubric, and it gets so difficult. I do prefer like just go to Comp with Stat, pick up like 5 faculty, the same project, work on it, grade it, upload it, boom. And that's data is really easy to work with and easy to draw conclusions. Instead, 10 faculty with 10 different projects with 10 rubric. You need a really full-time statistician to do that for you guys. And even the information that you will get, the conclusion that you draw, it'll be like in the 50% threshold.
I would agree with that too, of just, thinking about there's such a wide variety with faculty and understanding of what assessment is and something that would give some concreteness to it. And whether it's, a series of workshops that a group of faculty agree to do to look at, something they're doing in their course to really kind of follow the progression of understanding, the assessment that's going on throughout that process, to see the tangible thing, I guess, is of what's happening and what they're, assessing in that way, because I feel like there's such a wide variety of understanding what assessment is, or, the progress of something from this point to this point. So,
yeah, I think my department, like 5 years ago, we done it. I think I shared it with Scott. It was really something really simple. We took like 3 or 4 questions. We inject them in the final exam. We give it to all the 6 classes, 6 different faculty. They work together to create those questions, and we met and we drew the whole conclusion, the whole report. I think I shared it with Scott, and it was really simple and easy. And we target just liberal arts students who take in statistics, not everyone. And we survey them, we give them these questions on the final, and it was really simple and easy, and we have fun with it. I think something like that might help faculty to get excited about data, because a lot of them, they're really intimidated with it. Definitely some training, it will help a little bit. That's my point. Scott, you're muted.
Trying to block out the dogs barking. So if anybody's interested in what the report that Habib is referencing, it's in the assessment portal under the math department. So if you go into assessment, then you go into the STEM, then you follow that to the mathematics department, you'll be able to read the report.
So kind of building on that idea, I guess, Habib, also making assessment easier. And I didn't realize how early Elle was going to have to leave, so we didn't get to this. One of the other things that I've been talking to Paul about, and Paul and Elle and I have met, Paul and Scott and I have met, is what is happening with the assessment of the core academic skills. And Paul's real sense, as somebody from outside who's coming in 10 years after the core academic skills were created, is that the system we have is overly complicated. And that we've sort of spread the core skills out so much, like around the college, like there's so many different courses and there's so many different places that they're being taught without real intentional upkeep of sort of the validity of those core academic skills, right? That we have some concerns, about, what's really happening in some of the classes that are tagged as core academic skill intensive, right? So we know, for example, there are courses that get designated and then the person who did the work leaves, now an adjunct is teaching it, but it's still designated and it's supposed to be on the syllabus, right? So sort of what are we doing in terms of that upkeep? But then also in general, have we sort of spread it out so widely that we've made it so hard for ourselves, right? And so, for example, with written communication, which this year, given with everything online and written communication and how many sections we have, like I really expected to be overwhelmed with artifacts at the end of the fall semester. And I got like 30 of them, right? And like half of those were from Scott and Elle, right? So that doesn't even really count because you're on the committee and like I know where you live and I would have come to your house if you hadn't submitted them, right? So look, we have been talking about why it's so difficult. I will send out the call for written communication. Again, I'm probably send it out tomorrow. But we've had some conversations about, are there ways that we could be simplifying the core academic skills and then getting better assessment of those skills? And it kind of goes back to what you were just saying, Habib, like that's sort of what Paul has brought up is like, so I say to people, send me all your written communication artifacts, but we're not really checking, right? Like we don't know that the assignments people are sending me were truly written to match the written communication rubric, right? They just maybe happen to be papers. And so people are like, here's papers because that's written communication. And are there ways that we can try to make this simpler for ourselves, but also more reliable? So that's a conversation we've been having. Elle and I have also had some conversations about that from her end of it, which is sort of the overseeing of, who's teaching these classes, what's the training and all of that. But I'm kind of curious from this committee what your sense is about how we could simplify the core academic skills.
Just to point out the obvious, Habib has really taken on the quantitative
Yes.
element, and L has taken on the written communication element.
Mhm.
So that is the most simplified way to do this, is that two separate departments specializing in those areas have already taken on those roles. It leaves the other items or the other areas that are often broken up by department, in that the department essentially says, okay, this is the one we want to do. And as you had already mentioned, adjuncts coming in, academic freedom, even though it's written, it's listed as a intensive course, we can't ensure that those are being followed through. So it really does come down to, other than quantitative reasoning and written communication, how do we maximize the other areas?
Yeah, I'm thinking about what Kristen said. I think you're right. They're very complicated because when I look at the QR, they're asking for minimum 3 projects, 15% of the grade, and 3 projects shooting in different directions. And it's really, I don't like the 3 project. What we do, the math department, I think 3 years ago, what we did, we built like this big project that like 16 weeks project, that student collect the data and he have to go answering each questions as the semester does. It's a really big, But other classes, statistics is like, you can do that. But when you go to other classes like MAT 115, Calc 1, it's like 3 projects specific in different categories that make it really hard to measure any outcome with 3 different rubric. It's a mess, like you said. Yeah. And I'm thinking, what the easy way? I wish I could help you, but I'd love for you to share it with me. I don't know what the easy way. Easy way, like specific thing, you go for it. Like, I don't know, like for example, if we call this class, whatever that class is a QR, if it's prerequisite or not, what you want this student to come out from this. Doesn't mean you have to go to the outcome, 5 of them, and build something around those 5. That would be simpler. That's the easy way. Now 3 projects, 1 project, build based on the outcome, and that was it, 1 shot. I don't know who created this 3 project minimum. It's.
So, Habib, I will say that what you are describing is very much in line with the conversations that Paul and Elle and I have had, right? And Paul's real sense is that we've overcomplicated the core academic skills by making them very much about the things that students are doing in the class and not about the outcomes, right? And so by saying like you have to do for public presentation, right? Like you have to do a 5-minute and then a 10-minute, and then it has to have a PowerPoint, and then it has to have this. And that's not, the assignments are not really the same as thinking about what is the point of this, right? Like what is the outcome, how is this tied to the course outcomes? And then how is it being taught, if that makes sense. So
Oh yeah,
these words that we're doing, he hasn't used these words, but when he talks about it, I can see his anxiety about where the core academic skills now is that some of what's happening in the classes is like performative, in the sense of like, all right, we're making the students do all the things that they need to do, but that it's not necessarily tying to the outcomes of that particular course. And there's no real guarantee that students are getting anything out of those experiences other than like, yes, we made them do all of the things, so now they can check this off for graduation.
Yeah. I think
which sounds very cynical, but like, that's sort of Paul's impression coming from the outside, the way he's seeing it. We've lived it for 10 years. And so to us, it's like, no, of course we've done all these things, but he's like, what is kind of happening?
Tell you the truth, the math faculty, they hate the QR. They want to get rid of it. But I think what you said is really simple. We don't, you guys are already familiar with the back mapping, okay?
Yep.
Take the outcome, back map a project, and we don't have to do all the outcome. If I can get close to 60%, 50%, it's really good. And create 1 project comprehensive, 50%, 60% of the outcome by doing back mapping and measure it. That would be nice. I think if we switch it to 1 project, build through back mapping the outcome, I might like it. But 3 projects, 15% is a lot of work, and nobody like it. I'll tell you the truth. Math department, they hate the QR.
This might be a cool opportunity too, to think, and the fact that we're looking for a director of career services to kind of bring industry into the outcomes as well, and
Super
bring
good
some
point,
people
yeah.
in all these different disciplines of what they see as what's needed in the core academic skills. Kind of thinking about preparation for students leaving us. You know,
that's good.
it might be kind of a cool opportunity, right? To kind of
Yeah.
brings, you know, the person whoever's in that position can help us with that potential of bringing, you know, certain individuals from different industries. I don't know, that might be.
That's good. That's really good. That's a really
You know
good
what I
idea.
mean? Something that. Because they'd be helpful, obviously, too, right? And saying, okay, in this profession, here's the things within these core
Tangible.
skills that will really have students be most prepared for going into this.
Actually, Brian, not to put you on the spot, but I'm curious about your thought about that, because to me, that makes intuitive sense, but if everybody in here, like you are running a career track program. So I guess now I'm curious about your sense of the core academic skills as you're preparing your students to like go actually do a job and how helpful they are.
Well, consistently, I ask practicum site supervisors every semester, how our people do, what specifically do they need to do better, and what do they specifically need to, you know, everything from entry to putting yourself in a position to advance. And so I always get that kind of feedback. I don't always note it, but I go to people who I trust that I know from the community. And that's a great assistance to me every time. Plus, I give Audrey in Melton do, but it's a survey that we developed, and we put one in every class of every semester and get feedback on it. It's really simple. It's 7 things. It tells us what people like about it, what they'd like to change, you know, what they want to see happen, how recent is it, and all that kind of feedback is integral to everything we do as far as outcomes. Because if we're chasing the wrong outcomes, then what are we even doing?
Yeah.
So I think that's the main point. As far as the core academic skills, I've never paid an awful lot of attention to them other than through registration. But when we got the HUS 211, the trauma and behavioral health course in place, we got it in place as a global awareness core intensive. And anybody in the school can take it without prereq. And Kathleen teaches it, so you know it's done well. So that has heightened my interest in the core intensives, and I collect all the data, and then I try to get it read by independent people that don't teach the course or don't know anything about it. And that was really successful because Jack ended up not teaching a couple of semesters, and he read 100 pieces out of stuff that we submitted, and that really helped me come up with decent ideas about what's going on with assessment. I mean, I think assessment is great. It's you know, I mean, how you're supposed to do a job if you don't know what you're doing is okay. But I think 99% of the problem is getting not necessarily the buy-in, but motivation to perform what needs to be done.
Yeah.
To me, that's a real issue. Hey, many people dog it, and then they know it, they need it, they like it, but they don't want to put the time in.
Yeah.
So I can use criminal justice for an example that I've been struggling with for a while now. CRJ 202 is our criminal law class. It's one of the foundational courses for the Mass Pathways. There are specific outcomes that course must meet. When we did these intensive courses, I was fairly new at the college. I wasn't teaching criminal law, and the faculty member that was teaching criminal law has gone. But she designed the course based upon the core academic skills and not the foundational outcomes. And I went back, and when I took control of the course, I went to the foundational outcomes because that's for our transferability. The problem is that to meet the outcomes, my students need to write court briefs. It's called an IRAC model, and it doesn't look like any other type of writing. It's a legal brief. It doesn't meet the requirements of the core academic skill of writing intensive. So I'm forced to make a decision. Do I follow the outcomes established by Mass Pathways, or do I follow the recommendation for the core academic skill? And the last thing I want is students to graduate, transfer to UMass, and then in my statewide meetings, then UMass Lowell turn around and go, why don't your kids know how to write a brief? Why don't they know these specific cases? And so I've kind of let go of the writing intensive designation because I've been following through on the pathways. It's tough. It really is, because I can't show you a brief and that anyone on this committee would be satisfied to say, yes, that's writing intensive, even though they're writing anywhere between 6 and 8 pages a week.
Right.
But they're writing it in a model. They're not writing it with any, there's a very small section of that model that's called analysis. That is their critical thinking, but it doesn't follow. It doesn't follow what we would consider as a paper. It's a court brief.
Right.
So it's really difficult. And that is one of our intensive courses that really shouldn't be an intensive course if I'm following the pathways.
That's actually a really interesting thing that I guess I had not really thought about. But, and I guess we've talked about, where we have sections that have like 2 or 3 intensive designations on them, and like, how on earth are you possibly doing all of those teaching all of those intensive skills and also teaching your content when all of us know that like one snow day in the semester is enough to put us all into like full-blown panic mode about getting through everything. And so I guess that also logically follows, Scott, then there have to be courses also that are designated as core intensives where the skills for the core intensive are in some way contradictory to the outcomes of the course. And so like yours is an obvious example of it, but I bet that there are others out there too, or that where they're preventing faculty from, you're making that choice of like, what am I teaching this semester? Am I teaching the intensives that are labeled here, or am I teaching my outcomes?
Yeah, that's a good question. Now, if you respect the 3 projects and you have 3 of them, you have to do 9 projects.
Yeah.
You have
And
to
to
pick and
build off
choose.
what Habib was saying, criminal justice, and I'm sure Brian, you do too, criminal justice is one of the professional programs. We have an advisory board that we meet with every semester that's comprised of judges, state troopers, chiefs of police, victim advocates, specialists in their fields, that they review our syllabi and they come back with recommendations. Sometimes those recommendations are in alignment with our outcomes. They're in alignment with our core academic skills. Sometimes they're not. They may turn around and go, your students that we're hiring don't know this material. And we can tell that by speaking to them and by reviewing your syllabi, because you're not covering this content that we really need you to cover.
So here is just a thought, and obviously we can ponder this and I'll float it past Paul as well. But it's making me wonder if one of the steps in sort of reconceptualizing what our core academic skills are and maybe moving towards something that's more like a general education block and maybe not 500 different courses, would be to take the time to invite representatives from each of the advisory boards, particularly for our career track programs. Invite some reps from some of our high transfer four-year schools and start to find common points about what is it you think students need to be able to do when they leave here. And then going back to that idea of like backwards design or back mapping, instead of trying to create more courses that meet those outcomes, looking at where we're already doing them and trying to move students so that those courses become unavoidable. Which we already have a lot of unavoidable courses at this college, believe it or not, right? Like Comp 1, everybody has to take a math. You know, almost everybody takes either intro to psych or intro to soc, right? So I think there might be some places where we could look and say, like, where do we like highlight this a little bit better in a thing that students are already doing, in a content that a content expert is already teaching, right? But do that based on what advisory boards are telling us, what four-year schools are telling us, not, you know, like the AAC and I'm sure that they are brilliant and they have wonderful rubrics, but it's always also good to fact check that against, like, is this actually what we want students to know? Does that make sense? You're all kind of looking into the Zoom like I just said something that made zero sense. I'm a little concerned.
No, I completely agree with that. But then the problem, as it was 12 years ago or 11 years ago, is it puts an unreasonable burden on specific departments to take on these, and I can use Kim's area. If it's not covered in CJ, then where do you cover it? Oh, throw it to liberal arts. Now Kim is responsible for the burden of X amount of intensive designations.
Well, but I think what I'm saying, Scott, is that we would get rid of the intensive designations, right? So if everybody said, I need my students to be writing, we'd be like, all right, check. We make them all take Comp 1 and Comp 2. Let's look at the outcomes. Are those writing? Right? We are doing that. We don't need to be layering more stuff on. We don't need to be asking, right, you to teach students how to write to a rubric that doesn't make sense to your class anymore, right? And then you can go back to teaching students how to write solid briefs because that's what you need to do for your program, right? Because we've already had them take a writing class, right? If we know that they need some mathematical, like quantitative reasoning skills, does everybody have a math class in their pathway in the first year? Yes, awesome. Let's make sure that they're actually taking those classes and passing them in the first year. So instead of trying to add more designations, really saying like, and I think being realistic, right? Like we are a 2-year commuter school. Like there may be some things that our students are not going to do in their 2 years here. And that also might be okay, right? Like we might also have to say like, we can't make them do all of the things in 2 years. This is nonsensical. Because we have a lot of students that petition to graduate and then they haven't met all their core intensives, which to me, you know, 1 a year because somebody transferred in, okay. But if it's happening fairly regularly, to me, that suggests that maybe we've also tried to pile too much stuff on the graduation requirement. Just a thought.
Is it possible to change it from like, so you require all 6 of them, like minimum 3?
That would also,
because that will really push the student from graduation, or some of them, they say, you know what, I'm not dealing with this, I'll go ahead and transfer. And that's really hurt Northern Essex. Let's make it like minimum of 3. Yeah, we'll hit a 3 or 4. But when they go to 6 and some of them, they don't take the math or they went to, I don't know, somehow, and we lose them from the graduation. I think if we can reduce the number from 6 to 3 or 4, any of the 6, minimum of 3, I think will be nice. I don't know, it's an idea.
Just as a footnote, we don't require any math.
Excuse me?
that's
You
right.
don't
your
require
program-
any
no.
math in human services in the associate degree.
The QR. But to graduate, I think they need to have all 6 of them, am I right?
Yeah, they can do it through bio.
Mhm.
Oh, okay.
That is the thing, that in different disciplines that they're, you know, skew more this way or that way with
Yeah.
different academic core skills. So, you know, within that, and kind of what Scott, you were saying with briefs of, you know, flexibility within things as well, of saying there are different types of writing and different types of writing that prepare you for different careers that is all important writing and important practicing doing things. And there's not one set way of doing it basically within that. And I think, yeah, and I think the advisory board, that's great to say, thinking about, you know, these are, and I think actually that helps with getting student buy-in as well, of understanding why they're, you know, doing these things and what, you know, where it will get them, kind of thing, of simplifying and streamlining and understanding the value of the skill sets they're getting in our courses, basically.
So Scott,
The
what about,
advisory board person for journalism communication, I don't know if I'm allowed to do that. It might feel like a conflict of interest, but.
so Scott, here's also then, I guess, an idea, thinking about the larger, like the curriculum mapping. Well, I guess it's not just Scott, this is an idea for everybody, but I'm thinking of you because you're most familiar with this process. I mean, I guess another alternative would be to ask programs to look at like the program, like the course level outcomes across all of the required courses in your program, and say, somewhere in your program, is there a course outcome related to writing? Yes. Right? It doesn't have to be the same as Comp 1. It could be disciplinary writing, right? Like it could be technical writing for some students. It could be writing briefs. Somewhere among all of your required courses, right? The ones you know every student will definitely take, is there some place where they are doing quantitative reasoning? Yes, there's a math, here's a science, right? Is there some place that they are doing, you know, whatever all of the other ones are that we think are valuable? And that might also be a way to do it. So then we're not adding intensives, but we are making sure that somewhere in all those program pathways, students are coming up against something and in some way being assessed against these core skills that we think are important.
So I've written down what your question, and I can answer that. My 7th outcome is it specifically states writing skills. So for the program, and then we align those to based upon each course, the CLOs. The thing is that certain courses, like our modern policing course, students are asked, there is a final paper that it's a research paper, but they're also asked to write in report form, which is far different. So who, what, when, where, and why. Doesn't have the same structures as you would find in the research paper. It doesn't have the introduction. It doesn't, because that's not what courts are looking for. That's not what a police department's looking for. They're looking for the 5 W's and possibly how come. But that's it, because we live in a world that it's facts and only the facts. If you remember that before most of our time, that show Dragnet, the key thing that they used to say all the time, ma'am, just the facts and only the facts. So we teach that in that course, but for the most part, we are covered that way. But it's a great question to look back on and have all of the departments and programs look at their outcomes to see if they are covering the core academic skills in either a CLO or a PLO.
Yeah, I mean, and I guess from my perspective, I would argue that if you are having in that course, right, if you're teaching them to write in that specific way, which is specific to your discipline and the thing that they need to know how to do, like, to me, that is written communication in your field, right? Like, I don't want a police officer to write up a report that has only taken creative writing classes, right? Because that's when I'm like, what is this? This person wasn't even in my story. And so to me, I guess that's what I'm thinking is like, maybe we need to reconceptualize these as like within the discipline, right? Are your students learning to write in your discipline? Yes, then that's written communication. Are your students learning to think quantitatively in your discipline? Yes, right? Whatever that might be, right? Which in math is probably math, right? But in journalism might be something very different, right? And thinking quantitatively might be about audience, or it might be about like, how much are you charging per word to get paid in your first job? That is now the limit of what I know about journalism, Kim. But, and that might be also a way, I guess, thinking back to that idea of like, why aren't people like, people see the value of an assessment, but they're not motivated to participate in it. Maybe this is a way to bring it closer to home to build that motivation too, right? Because if your sense is that you are assessing the skills that are important to your discipline, and you have a little bit more autonomy about how to do that, right? Maybe this does become more valuable to people. Just an idea.
I like it because it's a refocus and it brings it back into the department / program versus this universal bubble that's over our head.
Yeah.
There actually ends up being some interesting crossovers between things, because at one point Trish Portanova was asking me for some artifacts connected to journalism courses I taught, and realizing that, and it's interesting, Scott, when you're talking about the who, what, where, when, how, that, you know, that's so journalistic, right? As well, the connections and things that to make for students as well, that, you know, even though I was telling her about, you know, a journalistic story and the inverted pyramid and, you know, the leads and the nut graph and the essence of a story, that there's actually a lot of crossovers between that and research papers that you'll do, or an essay you might write in English comp, and that the skill sets kind of combine in so many ways and bring about interesting things. Or interesting with math and, you know, journalism. I talk to students about the times when I had to take data and collect data and make assessments about data in my job as a journalist. So, you know, there's so many interesting crossovers of skill sets within different career areas as well. You can make arguments of, say, writing and writing intensive in different ways.
Well, I have to go. I'm already 30 minutes late for Elle's training.
Oh, oops, sorry.
No worries. So your host, Kirsten, and I will see you all back here. I have recorded up to this point, so whatever I have recorded, I will upload to the portal.
Okay, I was gonna say Habib needs to go. I actually need to go to another meeting anyway because we're out of time, so we can end it and upload this, and I'll see all of you in April, I think, is our next meeting. Okay. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.